All right. Thank you, everyone, for the lovely pause. I'm have to show this through a PDF as opposed to the live site. So as a consequence, I'm not going to be able to show you the live site. I'm only going to be able to show you the screenshots that I have from the live site. So I will, when you get this, I will make sure that the slides have the URL to the actual presentation so that you can go to it yourself. In fact, if you want to just write it down, it's opencreds.net. It's very complicated. This is a project that started off with our collaboration with T3 Innovation Network. Taylor, you want to say something about that process?
The process of getting LinkedClaims
Going.
Yeah, so the T3 Innovation Network is a network of members across various ecosystems that come together around learning and employment records and this digital transformation of talent marketplace. And Phil, as the facilitator for the Learning and Employment Records Network within T3, they came up with the concept of linking various claims together and coming up with different use cases for how that could be impactful for individuals and learners. And so we're able to raise funds from our philanthropic funders to build out this concept further and then build a tool to put it into action. So it's been great working with Phil and his team on this.
Thanks, Taylor. We actually began this project calling it simply LinkedClaims, which works really great in a technical audience. When we did the usability research with a range of people we have in mind as expected users, they had no idea what we were talking about. And so we decided to move to OpenCreds for open credentials, and that seemed to be a much more understandable phrasing, despite whatever confusion we might have discussed here at the conference about credentialing and micro-credentials and all the rest of the concerns about that. So let's just be clear where we're starting from. Anything at the moment in the job application process, by and large, begins with some sort of a resume that you submit. It's usually a Word or a PDF. And remembering that those are unverified statements. They are just so stories of the author of those documents. Forms that you fill out on a job applications are also unsupported assertions. And just about everything else in the application process that you're submitting, with the exception of potentially a link to a site that might have a credential or a diploma or something else that is official. That's just about all there is that is authentic in that application process. We're well aware of the value of the brand, and the reason that I mention that here is that these are self-asserted credentials, and the whole issue behind self-asserted credentials is that those credentials are what the individual claims, and that's it. A credential issued from an institution, a university, a business, etc., at least has the brand value of that issuer. And in this case, this is not going to be present with a self-asserted credential, and so we need to think about how to add value to it. But remember that when you get an institutional claim from such as a transcript or other sort of representation from the institution of the things you did to achieve a degree, the actual reality is that those things that you achieved are essentially observations by the individual instructor of the intentions of what they thought you learned. What learns in the actual class, particularly if those intentions are drawn from the syllabus, varies. So why are we doing this? In the US, at least, the number of uncredentialed individuals, it's just the state of Washington. There are somehow 639,000 uncredentialed individuals. They project over the next 10 years that they will have approximately 250,000 workers that are unable to achieve employment without credentials of some sort. So the idea here is that some people will get jobs and things without credentials, but they will not be able to meet the demand for those who need jobs and are uncredentialed going forward. And that's true state after state, and I suspect country after country. So we began this project thinking of all of the people that are not likely to have credentials to begin with. They didn't finish college. They may not have finished high school. They may not have gone to high school or college. And yet they're in the workforce. They have experience, and that's where they stand. So we began this by thinking that's who the primary audience was. The design principles for this application is that it runs in your browser. It is loaded from a web server, but all intermediate data are checkpointed to your browser. Completed credentials are stored in a drive location. In this case, assuming the individual is unlikely to have a credential wallet to start with, we're using Google Drive as a place to store these things. It will support both the DCC wallet and the ASU Pocket wallet for those people that have that. But I'm not demonstrating, I'm actually not demonstrating anything today, but I'm not claiming that right now. And finally, there is no state maintained anywhere because everything is in your browser. So there's no issues of PII or anything like that on the device. So there's two primary workflows, the self-issuer workflow and the recommender workflow. Here's the fan out of the slide of the images, in this case from the mobile version of the app. We have both a mobile and a desktop of the issuer workflow. And that workflow begins with the screen on the left side, and it basically has a couple of cards that look like different possible credentials. It asks you to capture your skills and experience, add what we're referring to as portfolio pieces as evidence, and potentially request a recommendation from others that you can then share with employers or put up on LinkedIn. We actually have the ability to put this credential on LinkedIn today. They go to the next screen, you describe your skill, give it a name, how long it took you to acquire the skill, and then some kind of skill text description. Notice that we are not going at this point to an AI interface in order to pull up things and translate those into a skill credential from a third-party Lightcast or other source at the moment. We hope others will think about doing that, and we may experiment with a client or edge version of an LLM so as to keep the personal data about yourself on your device. But we are not doing it now. This is all open source, so that when you want to do that yourself, you're welcome to. The next screen over has you ask for supporting evidence. Is there some picture or some document or some other piece of digital material that describes your performance of that skill? And finally, when you're done with that, you give it a title. It's a success. You've got a credential that's ready to go. And at that point, you can ask for, and you're prompted to ask for, a recommendation. It says it strengthens the value of your skills to have a recommendation. If you do that, it will pop up a text image, a window that shows a template for a recommendation request, which you can then edit. And then when you open up your email, when you click on the ask for recommendation, and opens up your email, it shows that email and it shows that text in your own client. We're not including the email inside this app. It's going to call it from your machine. And at that point, you can then go back and add a new skill or continue, ask for a recommendation, send it to LinkedIn and other places. This is what the completed recommendation looks like from a Windows perspective, that is to say on a laptop. And the left side is the actual skill. This one happened to be for baristas. And that image there, which is sort of the picture that highlights what the skill is for, is actually, in this case, a little video file of the person pouring the finished espresso. And then there's other evidence below, and on the right you see saving it. We thought the core of this application initially was just going to be that. However, we recognized, and after a bit, that we were completely wrong. The value of this thing is not based on the recommendation being nicely formatted and sealed and signed, etc. It's on what other people say about you associated with this recommendation. And so the conclusion we came to is trust is not an algorithmic or cryptographic proof method. Trust requires humans, context, and the relationships that connect them. So this is the recommender workflow. The recommender workflow begins when I have sent from my self-asserted creating of credential workflow, that email, in it is embedded the link to my actual self-asserted credential. The recommender is asked to describe their skills or capabilities. It's asked to talk about how much that took them to acquire, description of them, and then it goes on and asks for evidence about their bona fides. Who are they to be able to judge this recommendation request? What background do they have, and what evidence do they have to support it? And then finally, it allows you to create that recommendation, attach it to the original recommendation, and then send the email to the individual who sent you the request saying, I've completed it and here's the URL to the recommendation itself. So this is just a little screenshot that shows the sample message that goes when you present it. There's a credential in the bottom there where I claimed I was a warehouse inventory control skill, and it gives me something to work from. So the recommended workflow is, again, as I mentioned, all of these involve 4 steps. How do you know the person? Proof of the qualification, a comment about that person and their skills, and any additional evidence to support it. That's the crux of it. Behind the scenes, you're building an OBV3 credential. So let's go to the demo. Not today. So what's next? Usability. We're going to finish the usability analysis that we did the data collection from. It's already partially built into the tool that you'll see. We have to review accessibility compliance to make sure that we are fully accessible for people who have different abilities. The binding that we have, we would like to turn from a URL link, which is what it currently is, to a hash link. The hash link is a way of pointing to something, and the content that you're pointing to is hashed, and that content being hashed, you can compare with what the original was to determine, interesting, to determine if that content has been changed since the time it was authored. So it preserves the tamper evidence of the credential itself that has a proof to anything you point to on any place in the web that you point it to. So that object can be in a Google Drive, it can be anywhere that's web accessible in public, and you can point to that, and then you can have the link hash the content to the URL, and that will be put in the recommender credential back to you. We're going to be doing, as I mentioned, the support for the 2 different wallet types. We will make it available to you on GitHub. There is already a support email request that you'll see in the applications. If you have trouble, you can ask somebody and they'll respond to it quickly. Additional functionality. It's our expectation, at least for many small businesses, that they do not have a way to receive a JSON LD credential in a verifiable credential presentation or any other form. So the intention for this environment is to give them a way to preview a credential, actually initiate a verification of it from their browser. Then they will be able to request the data in the credential as a CSV file and download that data. They can then enter it into whatever most likely spreadsheet application their business is running on and use it, or whatever else they have. Finally, we're changing our DID method. We're currently using DID key just because it was quick and dirty. We're changing it to DID TDW if you want to talk to me about that. It's a trusted DID web approach. It's very, very elegant. And we've talked about a notary service. One thing DIDs don't do is connect a human to a string. The string of your DID is a completely random set of letters and numbers. There's no way that it attaches to you. So if we did a notarization, I'll get questions in a minute. If we do a notarization, then we can potentially have a DID associated with, a credential that is a recommendation type credential associated with you that can go along with the other credentials that are self-asserted. Last things, we're looking and asking others to consider how to help us or do for yourselves an AI agent interface. And lastly, you've heard from Trey Taylor that this particular tool will be used as part of the SSA, the skills savings account project that T3 is working on. And that's the presentation, and I will happily show you the links and the actual live demonstration outside on my laptop. Questions? Yes, Elizabeth.
Yes, thank you. So what protects a recommender from attaching privacy-protected information protected by FERPA or HIPAA or IP policy in a corporation?
Nothing in the software prevents that from happening. The question is where that's going. Since it is going simply back to your particular Google Drive, or it stays in their Google Drive, because it actually goes to both places, then the only people that will see any private personal information are who you send it to. So in that sense, there is at least some sort of break on that. There will have to be clearly some guidance given to the individuals doing this who are using the application. But we have not come up with an effective way where we can look at any particular attached piece of data and say it is or is not privacy revealing.
Yeah, I was going to ask a similar question yesterday about the skills fund thing, Taylor, that you were showing. I think there's an assumption sometimes that we are very self-reflective and that we know what we need to be credentialed for. We know what it is that we need to be recognized for. And for me, just personally, the thing which was missing from that, which is otherwise fantastic, is a system to know what other people think I'm good at.
Right. And we recognize that. We know that that's one of the reasons that the AI tools can be potentially helpful and why we encourage others to consider doing that. We just are doing this as essentially a live proof of concept that people can try and give us feedback such as that, but also use that to provide the documentation and or hints, as we're calling them in the application, regarding how they might go about it. We have already connected to Lightcast and tried that out, and that does work, but that requires a certain understanding of how those structured repositories work. And for the audience we're asking to address, that's not particularly helpful.
And Phil, we didn't have time to get into it today, but we're building out another workflow that will allow an employer or an organization to issue an assertion about an individual. So say you don't know what you have skills in, but I, as your supervisor, do. I could issue you a credential that says Doug has these skills, and you could decide to accept it or not. And that could help give you ideas to create your own credentials.
Right.
Okay, so while we're changing speaker, one last question. So,
Go ahead.
Don?
Oh, I might have missed it. I just wanted to check in. So when somebody shares to LinkedIn, where on the LinkedIn profile is it going?
It's going on. They need to have a LinkedIn account to which it is attached. So it's going to their profile.
But is it going to like the skills section?
We're trying various options, and we would love your feedback as to where you think it should go. Thanks very much.